Welcome to the Tanya Acker Show. Manny Rutinel is a Colorado state legislator who's running to represent Colorado's 8th Congressional District in Congress. He wants to flip the seat. So listen as he and I talk about how to flip the script on American political culture. You see how I just did that? Here I am with Manny Rutinel. Please don't forget to subscribe. Welcome to the podcast, Manny Rutinel, who is currently serving in the Colorado House of Representatives, and you are running for Colorado's 8th District. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. Excited to be here.
Here's where I want to start with you. You've done a lot of social that's really engaged people. You're good at explaining, and we can get into that later. You've done a really good job, I think, in your social, sort of explaining why you decided to run. But I often find that when people make a big decision like that, like the decision to do some life-changing thing, there's usually some trigger. Like there was some, spark that lit the flame, the straw that broke the camel's back. There's usually something that they point to and they're like, okay, enough is enough. What was that thing for you?
That's a great question. What I'll say is that I think there were a few of those, but I think it ultimately culminated in this understanding that I have deep in my bones that poverty is a policy choice. Hunger is a policy choice. The affordability crisis, it's a policy choice. And basically what I've been seeing is a series of politicians that don't understand the struggles of working families, aren't interested in putting up the intense fight with the energy and work ethic that it requires to be able to jump into and fight on behalf of working families and eradicate poverty and affordability crisis. I'll tell you that the one thing that comes to mind in this moment as to when I was sort of like triggered into this belief is that when I was a teen, my mom walked into the house with a stack of mail. She opened one up, looked inside, put it down, ran to her room, closed the door, and started crying because she just found out that the bank was foreclosing on our home. And she thought that I couldn't hear her. But those sounds are etched into my brain. It's the sort of sounds that I don't think anybody in the wealthiest nation in the world should have to hear or have to rehear every time they hear about the struggles of working families. So that's certainly one of the moments where I thought there are some broader injustices happening here against working families, and somebody needs to do something.
It seems that we're in a moment where a lot of people say that, right? Like populism, which I do think is rooted to some extent, not entirely. I think there are cultural elements that are separate from the economic piece. But if you kind of look at where a lot of the more successful policymakers are positioning themselves now, it is on the side of, the regular American as opposed to the elites, however you might define that. And then that's another subject. What are people doing wrong? It's a time where everybody is still focused on the price of eggs, the cost of gas, the availability of medicine. How are you going to do things different? How are you going to make this message resonate in a more substantial way?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that a lot of folks are positioning themselves as fighting on behalf of working class folks. And I think that's what got Trump the victory. I think what is the reality now, though, and this is what I'm hearing when I'm going to these in-person town halls that my congressman refuses to go to because he's scared of his own constituents. But what people are saying to me when they come up to me, they say, I voted for Donald Trump and Gabe Evans, who's this Republican congressman that I'm running against. And I feel like I've been lied to. And now I'm going to be voting for you. And the reason they feel like they've been lied to is because Trump said that he was going to go after the cost of healthcare, and instead he's gutting Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Trump said that he was going to go after groceries, and he's gutting food stamps and starting a trade war with the entire world, increasing prices on everything. And so there's certainly a difference between postulating yourself or positioning yourself as a person that's fighting for working families and someone who's actually got the policy chops to fight on behalf of working families. And I'll tell you, as a legislator, I've been doing that my entire legislative career. In 2024, just to give you one example, I passed the expansion of the earned income tax credit. And I made Colorado the best state in the entire union for the earned income tax credit, which gives money directly into the pockets of working families. And because of that policy and another family affordability tax credit that we passed that year, we slashed childhood poverty nearly in half with a stroke of a pen, just like that. And it's because we just decided to do it. We had people in there that were able to and decided to eradicate poverty and address the affordability crisis head on. That's what I hope to do in Congress.
Your district was created, or the district for which you were running was created in the 2020, or as a result of the 2020 census. And it's flipped, right? It's gone from blue to red. Now the incumbent, your opponent, Gabe Evans, holds it. You're trying to flip it back blue in the most clear way possible. Why should people in what seems to be a pretty purple place, why should they vote for you as opposed to the incumbent? What do you have to offer? And more specifically, Manny, let me ask you to include one other thing in your answer, because so many people have just opted out. They're not participating. They don't believe any of you. They don't believe anybody. So not only do I want you to kind of talk about why you think people should decide to embrace your candidacy, but talk about why do you think people should be re-engaging at all? How are you going to get those folks back?
I'll tell you why I'm running and why people are so excited about me. I think when they see me, they see someone who is willing to put up a fight, who has the energy, the work ethic, the fresh perspectives that so many people are yearning for right now, especially in the midst of the horrors of the Trump administration. And I think partly it's because I've got the vision and sort of education to be able to take this on. But I also have the experience. And I mean that not just experience in legislature. I mean that experience as a son of a single mother who came to America in search of that American dream. Like I said, when I was a teen, my mom found out that she was going to have her house foreclosed on with her children in that house. When I was 10 years old, that was the first time I filled out a food stamp application. I know you might like this. When I first came to Yale, I was part of the first generation professionals in law school. And people were like, "Oh, aren't you intimidated by going to law school as a first generation professional?" I told them, "What are you talking about? I've been dealing with the administrative state my entire life. I've been handling food stamp applications. I've been dealing with the justice system my entire life. I worked at McDonald's for 2.5 years. I sold my plasma so many times that I have a scar on my arm that is just a demonstration to me of the struggles of working families." After college, I became an economist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, where I took an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic. And then after that, I started getting calls back from law schools. And my mom doesn't always like this part of the story, but I'm going to tell you anyways. I told my mom, Mommy, I just got into Yale." And she said, "You just got into jail?" That's the sort of background I come from. That's the sort of background of this district. And we need folks that have that kind of background fighting for us in Congress. That's what I hope to do.
That's funny. On a more serious note, though, it's funny, actually not funny. It's interesting what you say about how people asked if you were intimidated by sort of the going to law school and all of that involves, or all that involves. But being somebody who came from a poor background, you were used to kind of navigating all of these different things. Don't you think that all of us, society, the culture, the way that we sometimes talk about poverty and poor people is belittling them as if, it's somehow a character flaw?
I mean, totally. I think we need to make sure that we're uplifting all people. And the reason why I think my story resonates with folks is that it shows the sort of traditional contours of that American dream. The idea that if you work hard, you're able to get the resources that you need. And I think what people are seeing right now is that they're working hard and they're not getting ahead. They're parents are doing a lot better than they were when they were that age. And I think that's the struggle and frustration of so many folks across the country. And of course, we need to make sure that regardless of what job you have a livable wage, you have the decency of a good home and good food and good health care. And I think that's what's been missing for so long.
But also, and so the flip side of that, I'd ask you is, do you think that sometimes there's a tendency to talk about poverty as if it's insurmountable and talk about horrible circumstances as if it's impossible? It is hard, to be sure, and the playing field may not be level. You may not be treated in the same way, have access to the same opportunities. But don't you think we make a mistake when we talk about, when we suggest that this barrier, such as it is, isn't something that some people are able to get past? I mean, look at you, look at so many people who are really living our ancestors' dreams. So how do we have a conversation that's not so dismissive on the one hand and dire on the other?
What folks are looking for right now is a little bit of hope. And I think my message is resonating because they see me as someone who grew up working class. But because of programs like food stamps and Medicaid, we were able to make ends meet. I was able to have health insurance. I was able to have food on the table. I was able to have a roof over my head. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we strengthen that ability for folks like me, for the little Mannies of the world, to be able to work hard and make it. And right now, I think fewer and fewer people feel hopeful about being able to make it because of all the problems that I just outlined before.
So how do you make them feel more hopeful?
Well, partly it's messaging and partly it's policy. We need to make sure that we put out a message out there about the potential for that American dream to be revived again and for folks to really feel it. I think that's what Obama did so well with, his hope and change messaging. Folks felt like, things may have been in a rut in America for a while, but here's someone who has a vision for the future. And, for him, that involved tremendous healthcare reform and other reforms. I think there was a lot more that we could have done in that period. Wish we would have done more around, the expansion of the child tax credit and other, issues around housing and healthcare affordability. But I think we need to get that message out there around a better world is possible. We just have to choose to address it instead of playing a game of political football like the Trump administration likes to do.
Specifically, let's just say we wave a magic wand, your party, the Democrats have a majority. And let's say that Hakeem Jeffries says to you, you know what, Manny, you ran such a great campaign. The magical fairy has given me this wand, and you get to craft the party's message. What does that message look like?
I think it has to be about the American dream. I think that is a fundamental part of the ideals and values of our nation and specifically our party. And so what does the American dream entail? It means that regardless of where you come from, regardless of the zip code you were born in, you have an opportunity to work hard and get ahead. And we've got programs here that will allow you to get a good education that's fully funded. We have a program here to make sure that if you fall through the cracks from a job, you have an opportunity to get back up on your feet with healthcare and food assistance. We've got the opportunity for you to have affordable housing because we're building a good amount of affordable housing for you to afford. And if you guarantee you the ability to live inside of a safe community and a home. And so you've got all the necessary ingredients. And now it's up to you to decide how you want to live your life. And we're not here to step in. We want you to decide how you want to live your life, how you want to prosper. You've got the foundations and the fundamentals for being able to do that.
Let's assume as a starting point that we think that those are good things that everybody should have. Housing, healthcare, a quality education. Let's assume that we all believe those things are good things. The devil's really in the details, right? As to how you deliver them. And it seems that efforts to kind of create real consensus as to how you do those things in a way that makes them likely to come about is not anywhere in the near future. I mean, I feel like we're more divided now than we've ever been, certainly across some cultural and other lines. So how do you create consensus to come up with a strategy for actually doing those things? You know, and again, let's just assume that we all believe they're good. Let's assume that we all believe that those are valid and worthy priorities and goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're laying out the right thoughts on this. So what I'll say is that you mentioned that we all agree on all these things. And I think there's so much agreement on being able to have affordable housing, good health care, good food for your children, a roof over your child's head. And so why don't these things come about? And I think the reason is that so many folks across the political, let's say on the other side of the political aisle, and especially Trump, he's a master at this. His whole shtick is to divide and conquer. He wants you to focus on the single mom who needs food stamps and Medicaid. He wants you to focus on the LGBTQ kid. He wants you to focus on the immigrant that's been working hard here in America. Instead of, he's trying to point fingers at those folks, instead of pointing at the real minority group in this country that has been trying to divide and conquer and buy our elections, which are the billionaires. And so I think part of the reason why we can't get things done is because money in politics prevents so many of the policies that we believe in from becoming reality, because they can overpower us with their money often. Now, that's not always true. Often people power beats money power. But unfortunately, because of money in politics, we can't have a lot of the policies that you and I would all hope for.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit on that. And I think that there are a lot of campaigns, certainly now. I mean, and this is, I think you're a great example of being able to have a big impact on a lot of people and come up against a very moneyed machine and do well. I mean, don't you think we're seeing more and more of that in elections? Look at New York, for instance. So I don't know if some of the things that folks relied upon, I don't know, even 10, certainly 20 years ago, I don't know if they can game change now. I mean, like, look at your social. How many billionaires do you have to get to put together some of those videos?
Yeah, no, there's no billionaires involved in the making of these videos. And
they're having a big impact.
Yeah,
they're having a big impact.
They're reaching far and wide, both in the district and beyond. We're getting all sorts of folks that are signing up to volunteer, to donate, all the things. So really grateful for that. But the truth is that, these billionaires are able to essentially buy ad packages. We saw in many cases that doesn't work. That doesn't always work. I'm not here to say that every single time money is going to be able to, influence an election completely. Sure. But what it can do is buy a tremendous amount of TV, radio advertising mailers. And they lie. They lie to the American public, and they're trying to divide and conquer us. They're trying to help us, trying to deceive us into thinking that certain groups are the problem instead of the real problem, which are often the billionaires buying our elections and engaging in corruption and getting tax deductions because they are able to purchase them.
People make decisions, any decision, certainly political ones, but they make their decisions based on the facts as they understand them or as they believe them to be. What is one fact that you think most people get wrong?
It's a great
question.
Aren't
these fun? I know. It's so fun with me, isn't it? Aren't you having a great time?
Totally. Always fun. I'm not sure what's going through people's heads all the time. I think one thing that I keep running into is the misperception around the value of important programs or the undervaluing of important programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit. I think people don't recognize how valuable they are to so many working families across the country. Like, for a lot of people, tax time isn't super fun. But for my family, tax time was the best time of the year because my mom knew that she was going to get a nice Earned Income Tax Credit check, which would allow her to go to the mechanic, put food on the table, put a roof over my head. And so I think most people don't realize that we can just eradicate poverty in the United States if we were to have a strong enough safety net with the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit.
Do you think that there's the political will, even amongst Democrats, to do something like that? And what's the argument against it? We're both lawyers, at least by training. I mean, still, we're both lawyers. So as you get into the head of the other side, why do they say that these things can't be managed? I'll throw out a couple of reasons. They're too expensive and the government doesn't do a good job managing certain sorts of programs and entitlements. Do you think that I'll let you respond to that. But if you try to get into the head of the folks on the other end on certainly issues like this, where you're talking about like very focused things like making sure poor people can eat and live with a modicum of decency, how do you get into the head of the other side? Like what do you feel like you need to anticipate? What arguments do you need to anticipate? Both in engaging with them, but more importantly, with the American public writ large. How do you sort of answer, I think, what is a lot of resistance toward moving forward like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the resistance comes from this divide and conquer strategy that the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress and the Senate have been employing for decades and decades and decades. It's the idea that, we shouldn't expand the earned income tax credit because then, who's going to get it? The LGBTQ kid or the single mom that should be working harder, or the, first generation American or birthright citizen. They've made us hate each other, or at least they're trying. But I think what's getting through to people is the idea that they've been lied to, that the Trump administration has and continues to lie to them about the reality and the truth about their neighbors. I think people, once they sit down with that single mom, once they sit down with that LGBTQ kid, they realize that what they were painted on in a lot of these media channels was false and was an attempt to scapegoat problems onto them that had nothing to do with them.
I'm a Californian, and my governor, as you certainly know, has been on a social media warpath of late. What do you think of his current online campaign?
Oh man, I think it's brilliant. I mean, every time I see it, I'm like, did Gavin Newsom's team really put this out? And they really did. And I think it's resonating with people. It's using a little bit of that fighting fire with fire, using the tactics of the Trump administration against them. And I think it's been executed fairly brilliantly. It's gotten him a lot of good publicity about the work that he's doing, which I think has been important because Trump is trying to rig our elections. And I think Gavin Newsom is trying to unrig it.
We'll come back to redistricting in just a moment. But before we go there, like if I want to just sort of talk about fighting fire with fire or not. I just read this piece and I can't remember the publication. I'll link to it. But it talked about how often little kids are told that you've got to, if a bully comes after you, ignore the bully and go tell somebody and just rise above it. And I can't remember this piece, and I'm not vouching for it. I'm not a psychologist, but I found it interesting because it said that we may have been teaching them the wrong thing, and that it's not always the best thing to, with all due respect, Mrs. Obama, maybe it's not always the right thing to go high when the other side goes low. I mean, you are running for a seat in the United States House of Representatives. And even though Congress may not be held in high esteem these days, Congress that's our legislative institution. I still got to believe that this country works. It's what we've got. So that being said, how do you decide, like when you're getting in the trenches, when is the time to throw fire back? When is the moment that you say, you know what, I got to ignore this fool and this nonsense, whatever the opponent may be or may be proposing, I got to ignore it because I got people in my district who can't eat.
Mm,
So how do you what's your philosophy on governing in that sense?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you broad level my philosophy, but before I get that, I'll say that we're also in pretty uncharted territories right now. We've got this wannabe authoritarian. And so it may be the case that we can't even use the idealized forms of, approach and strategy and civility. But what I'll say is that, from my economics background, I think what's probably most informative here is game theory. And there's actually been a lot of research into game theory as to like how one should interact with others in all sorts of negotiations. And basically, one strategy that seems to work best is tit for tat. And what that means is that you're nice to the people around you and to the opposition. But when they're mean or rude or they strike below the belt, you have to essentially retaliate because you have to let it be known that you won't be steamrolled over, that you're going to fight back, that there will be consequences associated with those actions. You need to set boundaries. And I think that's what we need to be doing right now. And that's why I like what Gavin Newsom is doing in fighting back. And that's what we need against the Trump administration.
What you describe might be loosely referred to as the don't start none, won't be,
Won't
none,
be none
theory of governance.
Check yourself. That's right. That's right. Many wise philosophers have put it in different ways.
Many wise philosophers have made that point very differently. So now let's talk about redistricting. President Trump told Texas to find 5 seats. And now Governor Newsom has said, well, I'm going to find some seats too. Where do you think this is going to lead? Well, first I'll ask you, what do you think about both Trump's demand that these seats be created and Texas's response, and then my governor's response to Texas? Give us your views on this saga, Manny.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the Trump administration is doing is seeing the writing on the wall. He knows that his popularity is in the toilet. He knows that he's the most unpopular president in U.S. history. I think the only person who's less popular at the presidential level than Donald Trump is Donald Trump in the first term. And so what he's trying to do is make sure that he's prepared for this incoming blue wave. And it's the most authoritarian attempt that he's done yet. It's really a disgusting attempt to destroy our democracy. And so that's why I'm really grateful for the Gavin Newsoms of the world that are stepping up and saying, if you are trying to rig our elections, we will balance that out and you will not gain a single thing. And the voters will punish you even more, because I think folks are paying attention to what's happening and they are absolutely outraged. So I'm personally very grateful for what Gavin Newsom is doing.
So I've had people on the podcast who have really proposed like bold, creative new decisions. Recently, I had Azzedine Fischer on. He's a writer, a former diplomat. He's a distinguished fellow at Dartmouth, and he wrote a piece in the Washington Post proposing that Egypt assume or be granted, with the consent of most of the pertinent stakeholders. He put forward an idea that Egypt be granted this trusteeship or temporary custodianship of Gaza, which I think isn't something that, a lot of people were talking about. What's a big, bold idea that you have for fixing a problem? And it can be any problem, something, you know a lot about poverty. You know a lot about what it's like to not be able to put food on the table, as you've just discussed. So what's your big idea?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few different ones, but the one that keeps coming to mind is the one that I've spent basically my entire economics education obsessing over, which is the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. And it's basically the idea of, if you are a citizen of the United States and you're working hard, but you still can't make ends meet, you get to have an additional sum of money to make sure that you and your children are able to eat, to have a roof over their heads, so you don't have to worry about that mechanic bill, so you don't have to worry about that important medical procedure that you have to pay for. And so if we were to expand the earned income tax credit, expand the child tax credit, we can eradicate poverty. Like, it almost feels like poverty is this thing that we can't overcome. Like that people are going to have low incomes and they are going to struggle to eat and they're going to struggle to have medical services. But we can just choose to give people the resources that they need. And it just takes people to recognize that, to really feel it in their bones. So I think those two programs, the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, expanding them to eradicate poverty in the United States, to be the first nation in the world to do that, I think would be amazing.
What's the hardest decision you've had to make since you've been running? And then maybe we'll even ask you a bigger question. You can tell me about the hardest decision you've had to make in the course of your campaign. And then you can tell me about one that was harder, even bigger than that. So you got something to chew on.
Oh, man. I mean, so you're in the public eye a lot. So I'm sure, you've seen all there is to see as a result of that. But like, stepping into the public eye in this way is really challenging. It's challenging for me, for my family members, for my friends. Like, this is not just an ordinary campaign. This is a campaign for the most competitive seat in the entire country. And so we're getting all sorts of attention, mostly good. But of course, you've got let's say the Twitter trolls of the world and a lot of other folks that are interested in scaring me, threatening me or things of this nature. And so the scariest or most difficult decision that I've had to make for the campaign was deciding to run and knowing that would come with consequences for myself and all the people around me that I love so much, that I want to protect. And now, because I'm in the public eye, they're getting or could get a lot more attention and see me getting attacked. So that's probably been the biggest thing.
Are you going to debate your opponent, Gabe Evans?
100%. I'm interested in debating Gabe Evans right now. In fact, Gabe Evans, where you at? Like, I'm trying to do it right now, whenever you want on your...
Have you met him? Like, have you ever met him? Do you know him? Do you, I guess it's like tricky these days to ask anybody running for office to say, like, is he a decent person? Like, do you know each other? So I just threw a bunch of stuff out there. What? Do you know him? Do you know him? Do you think he's a decent fellow? Like, what's your take?
So when I first started at the State House, I actually served alongside Representative Gabe Evans, who at the time was at the State House with me. He actually sat right in front of me. And so he and I got to interact all the time. In that context, we also served in the same committees in the House. And so I got to see him a lot. And I think the most important thing about a person is their actions. And ultimately, regardless of how he interacts with people on a one-to-one basis, what matters is the fact that he decided to gut Medicaid for hundreds of thousands of Coloradans, that he decided to gut food stamps and other affordability measures.
He voted in favor of Big Beautiful Bill, as it's described.
As it's described, exactly. Yes, he voted in favor of that. And just across the board, he just stands with the Trump administration on everything. He's, Trump says jump, and Gabe Evans says how high. That's the kind of guy he is. And so ultimately, he is and has been horrible to the people of this district, and that is shameful, and it's horrific.
You sponsored a bill in the Colorado legislature that would provide more consumer protections against sort of AI marketing, I think it was. Are you worried about AI? And tell me, because I read about the bill, but I didn't read it, so I don't want to misdescribe it. What was the danger that your bill was designed to protect? And then secondarily, are you worried about where we're going with AI, or do you think that it's being watched closely enough that we can devise the right protections?
Totally. So last year, I passed the most comprehensive AI regulation in the entire country. And basically, I'll get into the details of it. What AI is doing right now is making all sorts of decisions on behalf of humans without human supervision. And so what does that mean? That means that if you put in a job application and your name is Tyrone, and you've got the same resume as the guy who's named Jared, you as Tyrone will have a worse opportunity to get that job than the guy named Jared. And what's happening there is that the AI systems are using our past historic data to extrapolate into the future what sort of decisions should be made. And so what's happening is garbage in, garbage out, racism, sexism in, racism, sexism out. And so what we did at the Colorado legislature is say, okay, if you're a developer of these technologies, you need to be doing risk assessments, impact assessments, analyzing what's happening with their systems to make sure that these harmful decisions aren't harming our most vulnerable neighbors across the state. And to your other question about how I feel about AI broadly, I think it has the ability to bring about a tremendous amount of prosperity, but it also has the ability to bring about a tremendous amount of harm. And what we need to do as legislators is make sure that we're keeping up and regulating it appropriately so that we put in the right guardrails so that this technology sustainably grows instead of causes an immense amount of harm.
That's really interesting what you describe with your Tyrone example. And by the way, to be clear, I assume you're not talking about Tyrone of the Newport, Rhode Island, Tyrone, Washington, of the Newport, Rhode Island, Washington's correct. Have you ever met, I won't even just say a white person, but have you ever met a non-Black person named Tyrone?
No, I haven't. And I think the idea is that these AI systems are picking up our historic patterns.
Exactly. And so I want to dig into that just briefly. And I'm not going to keep you. This has really been fun and fascinating for me. So what you're saying is that AI is actually gathering data and sort of exercising discretion in certain circumstances about who can move forward in certain processes based on their historical analysis of that data.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Whether it's in the housing context, jobs context, education, healthcare, there's all sorts of data sets that are being fed into these AI algorithms. And these AI algorithms say, oh, every time that a type of Jared applied, we always promoted them or we always hired them, but we didn't for this Tyrone. And so what's happening there is that machine learning that's happening, that's hurting and bringing in the historic racism and sexism into the future.
By the way, the Newport example was a bad one because if you've watched The Gilded Age, there were plenty of Black folks in Newport. Do you watch TV? Do you have time to do anything fun?
I haven't watched The Gilded Age, but I've heard really good things. What I need to do is watch your show. When's that coming out next?
Well, you know what? We're streaming on Amazon Prime, but listen to my podcast and come back. I mean, you were really, you're a terrifically fun guest. So I asked you about the hardest decision. I think we only touched on a hard decision in the course of the campaign, but that's enough hard. What's the best decision that you've made? And don't say to run, like I'm assuming that you're all behind it. Like we got that, but give me something else. What was the best decision you've ever made?
Man, I feel like I have to think about this. This is so good. And I don't want to blow it.
It's not a game show. There's no prize. I got no prizes.
You know, I think some of the things that I'm most proud of are the ways that I've treated the people that I've loved in the past. And sometimes I think about my grandpa and grandma and think about how just like affectionate I was with them and how I never held back saying I love you. And we were a family that hugged and kissed and sang together and laughed. And so it was those little decisions of showing up for the ones that you love that I'm most proud of.
That is, I think, a very nice note on which to end. Manny Rutinel, he is running to defeat Gabe Evans, the incumbent Republican in Colorado's 8th Congressional District. As Manny said, it's one of the most competitive seats in the country. It's gone blue-red. He's trying to get it back blue. Manny, I had a really good time. This has been really fun, and I hope that you'll come back in the course of the campaign. You have a long way to go. It's like the elections next year, so
we've got plenty of opportunities to come back to see you again, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I will take you up on those. Thank you, my friend. More soon.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye-bye.